Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar in the series of webinars that's being hosted as part of the ITEG project. My name is Diana Rain. I run Smart Hydrogen Consulting. I'm a project partner in ITEG, and I'm going to be moderating the session this morning on the importance of tidal energy in a clean hydrogen economy. Before I get onto the speakers, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please use the Q&A box in the centre of the screen at the bottom to put in any questions you might have as we go through the session. Feel free to use the chat button to introduce yourself, but if possible, please use the Q&A to input the questions. So we should have time. If we keep to time, we'll have time for a few questions at the end of each session, but we will be coming together at the end for a panel discussion. So yeah, please go ahead and populate the question and answer question section. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make available the recording once the session is complete. And any questions we don't answer in the session, we will follow up and share the answers later. So by way of introduction then, trying to set the scene for our presenters this morning, there's no longer any doubt that we're in the middle of a climate emergency. And the need to transform our energy systems away from fossil fuels and toward renewable generation has never been more clear and more urgent. We've seen great progress in developing wind and solar generation across the globe. And subsequently, we've seen scale in these technologies rise and costs fall. And in fact, the reduction in the cost of renewables has been a major factor in the rising prominence of hydrogen as a vehicle for wide-scale decarbonisation. So tides and waves are more predictable than wind and sunshine. And yet the potential for ocean energy to date has not really been exploited in the same way. The EU earlier this year released its strategy on offshore renewable energy, highlighting a target for ocean energy deployment of 100 megawatts by 2025. So today we're going to consider the role of tidal energy in the energy transition. We're going to look at the link to clean hydrogen and look at some of the technologies and projects that are demonstrating its viability and its potential. So our first speaker today is Josh Williamson. Josh is a consultant at HyEnergy, focusing on the development, participation and management of the company's collaborative European projects. He's investigated multiple production pathways and produced a number of hydrogen roadmaps for European regions. Josh is going to be presenting on the recently published UK hydrogen strategy. So over to you, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Diana, for that introduction. Let me just share my screen. There you go. I think you should be able to see it now. So hello and welcome everyone. As Diana said, I'm Josh Williamson from HyEnergy Consultancy, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the UK hydrogen strategy. So firstly, though, a little bit about myself and the company. HyEnergy are a hydrogen consultancy specialising in the linking of the energy community and the hydrogen communities together. We've worked with a large variety of stakeholders and right the way through from SMEs to large industry bodies and national governments too. And we've got experience with a number of hydrogen technologies across the value chain, particularly around electrolysis and storage and distribution. Personally, much of my focus is on our collaborative European projects. That includes sort of various hydrogen production pathways, looking at sort of solar to hydrogen, wind to hydrogen, etc., as well as hydrogen valley style projects, whether that be Heaven and Green Highland, which we help to write and design as well. Here's a little bit about our activities. You can look at them later on. I'll share the slides. So if you're interested, you can have a look. So firstly, looking towards the EU, just to help build the context around the UK's decisions, really. The EU have been clean energy pioneers for a number of years now. They've helped to deploy a large number of renewables in order to decarbonise the electricity system, and they've realised, as you can see from that 25% reduction in emissions compared to 1990 levels, and they've helped to compared to 1990 levels, and they helped to look, or they're now looking at, instead of an electron focus, towards more of a molecule focus as they realize that more things need to be decarbonized than just our electricity systems. In the wake of our COVID-19 pandemic, what we've been focusing on really is moving green growth away from electrons and towards hydrogen and other molecules. So the EU saw this as a real opportunity for clean growth. So, and that's why in 2020 we saw a number of major European economies announcing hydrogen strategies, whether that be hydrogen importing strategies, whether their demand outscaled their potential creation of hydrogen, or exporting countries when their creation exceeded their demand. So where does that leave the UK? Well, the UK are still signatories of the Paris Agreement. They were members of the EU until recently, and so naturally the two's climate goals are relatively similarly aligned. And then in terms of hydrogen, you know, they're not building from scratch. The UK have had a number of successes in the hydrogen area, and they've got a number of leading technology manufacturers, as well as collaborative projects that have already been underway. For example, we've got HyDeploy, HyFlyer, and the London fuel cell buses. You know, these are projects that have pioneered hydrogen aviation, hydrogen gas grid blending and mobility right the way back to the mid-2000s in the case of the fuel cell buses. We've got leading technology manufacturers. ITM Power, one of the leading electrolysis companies in the world right now. And they've just opened their Gigafactory, which is the largest production facility in the world for electrolyzers. Ceres are solid oxide fuel cell manufacturers, and they're sort of the premier name within that, and they're partnering with people like AVL, who are global who are a global company, helping them to maintain their position at the front of the line. And we've also got a number of sector bodies. You know, the three associations there are helping to advise on policy, disseminate knowledge, and create regulations to make the hydrogen market a success in the UK. So we've got this big picture building within the sector, and the UK is in a good position at the moment. But where does that leave us in terms of sort of formal announcements? We knew that the EU were announcing strategies in sort of mid-2020, but we had to wait a little bit, and we haven't quite got our hydrogen strategy yet at this point. In November 2020, we got the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, and that came with a range of environmental targets, and it's where the UK have really tried to zero in on their zero emission technologies. It has a number of targets that are key to hydrogen. One of those is 40 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030, a potential sort of green hydrogen production sector coupling opportunity there. It's got a hydrogen opportunity in itself, 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production by 2030. And also on the application side, it's got the ban of non-zero emission vehicles, amongst other things. So there's this real image that hydrogen can play a role within all of these areas. And finally, you know, to achieve this all whilst favouring UK innovation and potentially exporting internationally if possible. So that's where we were sort of at the start of this year. And then moving on to this year, we were hoping for the swift release of the UK National Hydrogen Strategy, and unfortunately we thought we'd get it in early summer, but we had to wait until August. But you know, beggars can't be choosers. So we got this document which shows a roadmap for the development of a low and zero carbon hydrogen strategy within the UK, and it's split into three main sections. The first of which is the role of hydrogen within the UK. And this is going to be primarily used in two areas, one of which is to offset the use of natural gas, and secondly, to prevent the use of grey hydrogen and changing it for blue or even green. The UK predict this will end up in a sort of 20 to 35% final energy position as we ramp up to 2050. And as you can see a large amount of carbon savings too. Within the strategy, there's still a focus on blue hydrogen production, which is that is grey hydrogen where the carbon is captured. And the target is still 5 gigawatts. That didn't change from the 10-point plan. And finally, again, we're still focusing on UK innovation rather than importing. There's this position where globally a hydrogen market will open up as this importing exporting position starts to develop. And the UK recognise that they're not going to be able to rely on importing solely, and so they want to build a strong UK position before potentially exporting their own technologies and expertise overseas into these international markets. The second section, which is really pivotal, is the hydrogen value chain. In terms of production, the UK are going to focus a twin track approach. That means that the blue hydrogen production will take the brunt of this force, at least initially, whilst electrolysis will be seen as suitable for much smaller deployments and isolated areas before it starts to take on a bigger responsibility within the industry as the technology becomes more mature. Whether it's blue, green, or grey hydrogen, storage and distribution mechanisms are going to be pivotal to deal with this increase in demand and production. We're going to need even greater sort of storage containers that can be manifolded into larger tube trailers, big hydrogen pipelines to transport large amounts of hydrogen from demand or from creation centres to demand sites, and even waterbound transportation mechanisms of hydrogen. And as previously mentioned, industry and heating are going to be replacing that grey hydrogen and natural gas, but also mobility is going to be really pivotal in the hydrogen space as well, particularly HGVs and heavier vehicles, where batteries perhaps don't have as many advantages as their hydrogen alternatives. And the UK have already released a £120 million Zebra scheme to help replace buses with zero emission alternatives, I think roughly 4,000. So that sort of shows you where the UK are starting to position their mobility sector. And then the final area that I'm going to talk to you about today from the hydrogen strategy is its value to the UK. Because the UK, obviously, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, needs areas for fast growth to help bounce back. And the low carbon industry or economy within the UK is predicted to grow up to 4 times faster than that of the normal economy in the coming years. So in terms of hydrogen, that could mean 9,000 jobs by 2030, and that could actually rise to 100,000 direct jobs by 2050. In terms of where that's likely to be, we're likely to see a lot of that investment within the north of the country and areas where the industrial heartland, where there's been a lack of investment probably since sort of like the 1970s onwards. In terms of how that support's going to be managed, there's a £1 billion net zero innovation portfolio, which will come complete with £240 million for a net zero net zero hydrogen fund as well. There's also £1 billion for carbon capture technologies, and I think roughly £2 to £3 billion for car manufacturing as well, exploring their zero emission possibilities. So that it's building this whole picture where these industries will work together to pursue these net zero solutions. And obviously, we're going to have a full systems approach with industry, academia, and stakeholders working together to pioneer British business. And then once that British business has matured enough, the UK will look towards its exportation possibilities in terms of expertise and technologies, not in terms of hydrogen export. So that sort of all boils down to these key commitments, really. Get it right, and the UK's targets could seem rather minute in comparison to what's really possible for the country. But get it wrong, and we'll have a lack of the funding will be underutilized, and it could leave the country in a real predicament as how to achieve their net zero emission goals. But for now, things are looking promising. The UK have already done the legwork in a number of projects to establish these technologies to then start the scale-up activities, whether that be in industrial scenarios such as the ones on the right and HyNet in this diagram, or just demonstration projects. SGN's H105 is one such demonstration project where they're looking to heat people's homes with hydrogen, as well as their cooking as well, and that's 100% hydrogen from a pipeline. And these sorts of projects can be key not only for overcoming the technical challenges that we see, but also for achieving public buy-in. If you ask the average person on the street what they think of hydrogen today, you're likely to still get the answer it's something to do with its explosive or the Hindenburg, etc. These projects are really important in overcoming that point of view and achieving a higher penetration in public-facing areas. So, whilst we're talking about the strategy, we also need to talk about its challenges. That high levelized cost of hydrogen is really the central challenge. A customer isn't going to be really willing to pay more than their current grey hydrogen price because it will hamstring their profits, and who's going to want to do that? What we really need to do, though, is not just take this position where it's, we just need to scale up and low carbon hydrogen will come down in price. It's really a mix of all these challenges all together, and we need a coordinated set of measures which will tackle all of these in accordance, and that will lead to the central challenge being tackled. And of course, you know, scaling up is part of that challenge, but we need a coordinated set of measures. In terms of sort of marine for hydrogen, in the national strategy, there's not actually that much mentioned, unfortunately, aside from sort of saying Scotland and Wales are great locations because of their marine potential. So I'm hoping that in the rest of this webinar, it will be a great opportunity for us to hear a little bit about the solutions that the tidal sector, the tidal and the marine sector are creating in order to sort of force the government's hand in that area a little bit, as we've seen a lot of support for solar and wind, etc. And it would be great to see the marine and the tidal area do the same. Just quickly, if you're just getting started with hydrogen or you'd like to talk to some experts based on this presentation, I think that these two resources are a great place to start. The Hydrogen Territories Platform and the Community Hydrogen Forum are great areas where you can talk to these people and explore your potential as a community or a company. And finally, there are my details. So if you'd like to get in contact and talk a little bit about your hydrogen possibility or know a little bit more about the hydrogen strategy in general, then please feel free to get in touch. Yeah, I'll accept any questions now, Diana.
Thank you, Josh, for that summary of the UK hydrogen strategy. A couple of questions. How does the UK's strategy on hydrogen compare to other EU countries in terms of size and really their ambition?
Sure. So in terms of other countries, we've seen many other European economies announce their hydrogen strategies, obviously in around 2020. And I think two of note definitely are Germany, which announced around 8 to 9 billion euros, supporting somewhere in the region of 60 projects, whereas France announced 7 billion, which both rather sort of dwarf the UK's measly 1 billion net zero innovation portfolio, which in itself isn't all destined for hydrogen activities. France have set a 6.5 gigawatt hydrogen electrolysis capacity by 2030, which I think is the largest in all of Europe over that time frame, with most of the hydrogen destined for industry, as that's where their primary use is. Whereas Germany have set a 5 gigawatt electrolysis capacity over the same timeline. For these EU countries, I think we'll see electrolysis be the leading hydrogen production method, as green hydrogen is seen as the ultimate goal, with blue little more than sort of a transitional necessity. Germany, in terms of its position, is quite unique. They've already invested in the necessary refueling infrastructure for fuel cell electric vehicles, with I think 100 refueling stations almost to date, meaning they're ready for this mass deployment of vehicles, but maybe batteries are still taking that passenger share of the market, at least in zero emission. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. And then in terms of one other as well, the Netherlands is a very interesting case where they're deploying a whole hydrogen region, complete with value chains on green hydrogen production as part of the Heaven project. So whilst the UK strategy is a step in the right direction, it's certainly a bit of a disappointment in terms of these amounts of funding you're hearing from the other countries, whilst the ambition is also a little bit disappointing as well. But hopefully with the announcement of the hydrogen funds, the hydrogen business plans and the hydrogen standards next year, then it will become a bit more of a bigger picture view.
And for the UK itself, which regions do you see standing out in terms of moving forward on hydrogen and funding? I know there's been some announcements this morning. We talked about it, so that might
yes.
you might have the answer already.
Yes. Well, in terms of sort of key geographies, I think the UK have taken note from these other places like the Netherlands. Their whole systems approach based on building up hydrogen from key demand centres, and as we know now, these key demand centres in the UK will be their industrial clusters. The HyNet and the North East cluster, which are based around sort of the Liverpool, Teesside, Humberside area, were announced as gaining funding this morning, and that's because these areas have a great number of hydrogen users. They've got refineries, chemical production, power generation, steel, cement. The list goes on, and they can turn their grey hydrogen use into blue hydrogen with CCUS or green hydrogen by using their offshore wind ability, which I think the Dolphin project is also investigating as well. And it's also worth noting that they've got real geographical advantages too. They've got pipelines that can be changed to CO2 or hydrogen depending on their need. And they've also, in terms of that east coast of the country, got access to the North Sea gas reservoirs and fields that they can pump CO2 in for sequestering. So the UK have seen this and they've thought this is the perfect opportunity to co-locate that production, that distribution, and that those applications for the lowest cost hydrogen possible. And then, you know, it will build out. We'll see the refueling stations come, the charging points, the pipelines, the boilers, and even the heat pumps. You know, this zero emission economy will grow wider from these sectors where the bulk of the infrastructure will be placed initially, and then we'll build that zero emission economy for everyone surrounding it.
Thank you, that's great. There's a question on the chat. Will there be more support for green hydrogen to compete against blue hydrogen? I mean, I guess you know, the government tends not to pick winners, and I think technology winners, and certainly that you talked about this twin track approach in the near term. Do you see that changing in the future?
I think if you're going to see it change in the future, it's probably going to be in the long term, because the UK, with this North Sea fields, etc., are favouring this long-term blue hydrogen approach, which we're not seeing in the EU or elsewhere. In terms of support, you know, maybe we'll see these different colours of hydrogen gain different access in a global market sense. I know there's a lot of talk about that in the EU, and if that's the case, then maybe the UK will have to adopt a similar approach. But I think certainly in the meantime, the UK just looking to increase their low carbon hydrogen production capacity, and that's the primary focus. And then they'll look towards green and blue and how that will change. Great,
thank you very much, Josh. I'll bring you back at the panel discussion.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
So moving on to our next speaker, we have Chris Ward. Chris manages a portfolio of key projects in the European Marine Energy Centre, or EMEC, including the 11 million integrated tidal energy into the European grid, or ITEG project, which is funded by Interreg Northwest Europe. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Diana. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. As said, my name is Chris Ward. I'm a project manager at the European Marine Energy Centre based in Stromness in the Orkney Islands. And yeah, really excited to showcase the ITEG project. As Diana said, integrating tidal energy into the European grid. And we commenced this project in 2017. It's had, again, like most projects do, had a significant amount of delays, unfortunately. But we're pleased to say that we're coming to a point now where we're happy to showcase the project as it moves into its final year of the project. Now, project partners are vast and wide. Some of the project partners are on the call this morning, such as Orbital Marine Power, Smart Hydrogen Consulting, and some of the other partners, as you can see there, Elogen, formerly known as Aviva H2 Gen, and the Energy Systems Catapult, as well as our academic partners supporting from mainland Europe as well. So a really good broad spectrum of project partners, and they've been contributing significantly to this project over the last couple of years. So for those of you that don't know about EMEC, EMEC is the European Marine Energy Centre. It was established in 2003 as a non-for-profit business, and we're based in the Orkney Islands, which is get to John O'Groats and keep going. Okay, so yeah, based in on the north coast of Scotland with abundance of natural resources such as wind and tidal and wave energy contributors, and you can see there from the map and from the grid EMEC's test sites. So in the green is the wave test site, and the blue is where the tidal arrays will be established at the Falls of Warness, just off the island of Edy, which James will talk about the tidal turbine very shortly. And then the hydrogen production site, which is also based at the site of Edy as well. So over the last 18 years, EMEC have had 34 marine devices deployed from 21 clients from 11 countries. So it's a really vast, broad portfolio, as you can see from the picture there. So what is the ITEG project? ITEG project is key to develop and validate an integrated tidal energy and hydrogen production solution for clean energy generation in remote areas. Open market opportunities for the ocean energy sector through hydrogen production, and optimize an EMS, an energy management system, and fast track a clean energy generation, management and storage solution towards commercialization. And then our partners are working on building a roadmap to support replication of the integrated solution in other remote and grid restricted areas. So from the diagram there, which you can see the Orbital O2 device, which is now deployed at the Falls of Orkney EMEC test site on the Orkney Islands, the island of Edy, and then that's connected to the substation, and it will be connected also to an electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen. And the ways that that's stored, we have static storage on site up to 500 kilograms, but then you'll be thinking, how does it get off the islands? Well, we have specific bespoke tube trailers designed to carry hydrogen from and around the islands, and they can carry up to 250 kilograms of hydrogen to then be dispensed into the application that is required for. So where are we at with the project at the moment? With the slide there, we have significant installations and builds this year. So we've got kind of a wide deployment of activity happening here. So on the previous picture, we showed you the tidal turbine, which is the Orbital Marine Power's tidal device, but also we have an existing electrolyzer on site. That's around about 650 kilowatts. That's been upgraded and will be commissioned hopefully by next month as well. We have the space there, as you can see, with a concrete plinth ready for the Elogen equipment to come, which will be part of the ITEG solution. That will be coming in summer 22. The light green building, as you can see, that's the substation. And then we've also got the larger grey building, and that's going to be housing a 1.5 megawatt Infinity battery solution, which is very exciting, composed of 48 battery units. And they're also connected to the Edy wind turbine, which is a 900 megawatt wind turbine, which is also connected to the site as well, which with all this information all coming through the site, we've now some great data analytics, be able to power green hydrogen from wind and tidal solutions also, and then be able to store the curtailment either as hydrogen, but also in form of battery as well. And the battery will be able to offset the tidal generation in the slack periods to continue to produce green hydrogen as well. So very exciting times, and we're very, very looking forward to the opportunities which will be coming out of Edy next year as well. So other elements of the ITEG project, we have an EPC contract awarded to a local contractor. And part of that was creating the civil works, also the energy management system, the electrical upgrades for the site, as there's a lot of power requirements there now as well, but also the integration of the hydrogen systems and being able to connect to the storage and making sure that's gone through a full safety requirements as well. So very excited about the options ahead between the end of this year and the end of next year. As all of us have been affected by COVID-19. Nevertheless, as far as the ITEG project, but all the partners have been working hard from behind the scenes, obviously virtually, but also some of the more challenging aspects, which probably James will allude to later, regards to actual physical build of items of equipment as well. So luckily, we have been able to work through this, but like all of us, everything's just slower, bit more expensive, and that does hit the project, and we have to plan accordingly to be able to mitigate these circumstances as well. So we have been suffering supply chain issues, resulting in delayed delivery of some of the project elements. Obviously, when furloughed staff was an issue, we didn't have the contact and the person power to be able to deliver deliverables on time as well. And manufacturing environments such as the shipyards for a safe working environment due to COVID, which has been something which has been had to take into consideration as well. But we're working through these, and we have got a project extension until December 22. So a large modification has gone in for the partners. There was no project funds allocated, and on top of that, it was just basically a time extension. So the partners had to work hard to make sure their budgets can align and still deliver the project to the new extension time and on budget as well, which has been very challenging. And we all have been working remotely for the last 2 years as well. So as much as working online is fine and it's practical and it serves a purpose, it doesn't obviously get the fact of building up relationships with project partners, being able to have those over the desk conversations and being able to progress things in different elements, and all progressing towards, which Josh alluded to earlier, all the different requirements which we're pushing these projects to be able to achieve. And we have had 2 project partners withdraw, unfortunately, partly due to COVID, and the time extensions couldn't be sustainable for them. But happy to say we brought in a new partner as well, such as Smart Hydrogen Consulting, and Diana and the team there. And the project has been through a significant amount of risk management workshops, looking at all the risks, not only the site safety information, the equipment coming in, the integration, but also the approach of how we mitigate the actual successful project, to make sure it's really key that we do, champion tidal energy and hydrogen conversion, to make sure that there's a clear network and supply chain methodology, and really bring that localized cost of hydrogen down as well. So we're all very keen, very motivated, and very excited to see this project come to fruition next year. So the final overview is obviously from a coastal and island communities perspective. They're kind of at the end of the supply chain, as you saw in the map earlier, and have potentially a new economic and security opportunity through green hydrogen and energy system decarbonisation, which is fantastic. We can start to bring that together. And the other projects, again, which Josh alluded to, in and around the Orkney Islands, we're looking at decarbonising through hydrogen, the ferry system, potentially aviation has been tested locally as well as local transport and heat supply to such as the airport and to the harbour buildings as well as auxiliary cold ironing for the ferries overnight. So they're utilising green hydrogen converted obviously into electricity to be able to power the boats overnight as well. So there's lots of really exciting elements happening up here on the Orkney Islands. And then ITEG Tidal to hydrogen production aims to demonstrate a solution for grid export due to limitations in Orkney and the curtailed grid here that could be replicated in these communities, because the Orkney Islands were built to bring power in but not take power out. So that's obviously one of the huge challenges, and hence why we have been looking at tidal and hydrogen as a solution for the Orkney Islands and their power constraints. And then looking at the key learnings gained, I've been sharing other projects launched, which again, Josh mentioned, such as the Heaven Project in the Netherlands, Islander in Germany, and the Green Highland Project in Spain as well. So lots of exciting things happening across the project. And if you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. That's really great to see the project moving into its operational phase. I guess it's been a challenging year or so, well, for everybody with COVID, but particularly when you're trying to put equipment on the ground.
Very much so.
A couple of thoughts. What's the current demand for hydrogen production around Orkney?
In kilograms, I can't give you that figure off the top of my head, but like I say, we do have various different projects which are coming to get that demand and that requirement at the moment. So we have a 75 kilowatt CHP unit at the harbour, which will hopefully start to be functional very shortly. And we also have a 175 kilowatt CHP unit at the airport as well. And we also have a hydrogen dispensing unit in the town. So we have 5 trailers, both all at 250 kilograms each, and they can then circumnavigate around the islands, refueling and dispensing all at a time to meet demand at the moment. And just to put into context, a trailer at 250 kilograms roughly equates to 8 megawatt hours, and I think it's around about 2,000 kilowatt hours that it takes a household to run throughout the UK. So looking on that perspective, then you're looking at one trailer can power a household in the UK per year and things. So we're on the way to make some great inroads and great strides towards decarbonising the local community.
And is there plans to bring more vehicles to the island, more hydrogen vehicles?
There is in other projects that we're working with, looking at decarbonising mainly the transport industry, so maybe large haulage, and the bus network is something that we are looking at in adjacent projects as well, making sure that we are meeting our net zero targets as we move forward, which is again another demand on the supply chain, and hopefully bring down the cost of hydrogen to make sure that they are more cost effective, but also from really passionate about the green hydrogen solutions as well, coming from being created with our partners at Orbital Marine Power.
Yeah. How does the hydrogen move from ED to Kirkwall? Do you ship it?
Yeah, so it's dispensed from the static storage into a tube trailer, and that is basically a small HGV vehicle, and which is made bespokely for commuting around the Orkney Islands. And then it's put on one of the ferries, so one of the small inter-island ferries that are run by Orkney Islands Council, and then it's shipped to what we call the mainland in Orkney, and then distributed to the various different requirements which you need, either to the airport or to the harbours or to the hydrogen refueling station as well.
Okay, and then could you just explain what the benefit of adding a flow battery to the project? What benefit does it bring?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So the flow battery is just another element of storing power, and obviously when we have potentially two electrolyzers there, hopefully that they will be working potentially simultaneously. One may be on, one may be off due to repairs and maintenance. But also from a grid perspective, we have a curtailment of how much power we can actually export to the grid as well. So at that point, we can store excess energy in the grid, in the battery mechanism, and obviously when the tides are at a certain element and the tidal turbine may not be producing as much power, we can supplement the production of hydrogen through the energy which is stored in the battery as well. So hopefully having more of a continual production of electrolysis from not only the tidal turbine but also from the power stored in the battery as well.
So that maintains the upstream on the electrolyzer.
It does, and also backed up by the wind turbine as well. So with all these elements coming together, we pretty much have all the renewable aspects coming together to help produce and store electricity, green electricity on the islands.
Fantastic, that's great. Thanks ever so much, Chris. We'll bring you back for the panel discussion at the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So our next speaker is James Murray from Orbital Marine Power. James is the program manager. Since 2012, he's administered a range of national and international R&D programs associated with the commercialization of Orbital's floating tidal technology and complementary initiatives in the areas of environmental science, hydrogen, and energy storage management. So James is going to tell us all about the O2. So over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Diana, and welcome to everyone this morning. As Diana said, my name is James Murray. I'm the program manager at Orbital Marine Power. Today, I'm going to focus on the tidal technology. Obviously, it's critical, as Josh said, that there is a cost-effective supply of low carbon energy for supplying the hydrogen economy. So I'm going to speak about the Orbital Tidal technology. More specifically, our commercial demonstrator unit, the O2, which was launched this year. Some of its unique characteristics in terms of providing a low-cost solution for unlocking tidal stream energy, and then its implications for both renewable energy sector and for the hydrogen economy as well. So firstly, what is the Orbital Tidal technology? So it's a unique floating tidal platform. So it's a platform to which two sets of rotors are mounted, large rotors, which is moored in fast flowing tidal currents. And we have some unique features to enable low cost installation, maintenance, and access. And we have developed this technology over the last 20 years to large scale, utility scale units in excess of 70 meters in diameter, in length, and install capacities per unit of in excess of 2 megawatts. So really our vision is for developing large-scale farms, large-scale tidal arrays of our technology, depending on the site, upwards of several hundred megawatts of installed capacity per project as the sector grows. So it's really, very significant amounts of low carbon energy is our aim. It's not so much at the small scale, even though the technology can be scaled both ways. So this is the O2. This is our commercial demonstrator unit that was supported through a number of funding support sources, but including the ITEG project. And this is the tidal turbine that was installed in Orkney earlier this summer. and will be integrated with the hydrogen plant and the electricity and energy management system that's being developed through the ITEG project. So the O2 has a number of unique features, and it's really our vision for low-cost tidal stream energy and how that's going to be achieved. So it has an installed capacity of 2 megawatts, and with 2 sets of rotors, each 20 meters in diameter, giving an overall swept area of 600 square meters per device. It's the most powerful tidal turbine in the world. Each unit can power enough electricity for about 2,000 UK homes. So that's what the unit in Orkney that's been installed will power through its operational lifetime. It incorporates pitch control for floating tidal energy. That's a significant upgrade on our previous prototype units. And really, one of the key features and one of the key aims we have for delivering low-cost tidal energy is how do we enable low-cost installation, maintenance, and access. So we have a towable floating platform. So really a lot of the commissioning can, connecting the nacelles, the rotors, the powertrain, all the control systems, a lot of that can be commissioned onshore at the shipyard or the offshore fabrication facility. It can then be very readily towed on site and connected to its electrical and anchor system on site. So there's a minimal amount of offshore commissioning. It dispenses with the need for any heavy lift vessels or expensive vessels associated with the installation of the project. It can be installed with low cost, locally based workboat vessels. So we achieve that kind of the towable nature of the platform by having these unique retractable legs. But these retractable legs give us another key advantage. We can bring the powertrain, the pitching hubs, and the blades right up to the water surface for on-site servicing. So all of the various subsystems, both in the platform of the device and in the powertrains, the gearboxes, generators, all of these kind of things are highly accessible on site. And again, we carry out all of those operations with a low-cost workboat vessels. So really, this is one of the the key advantages of our technology. And I'm going to move on to a video now, just kind of demonstrating that. So you can see here that we have hydraulically actuated legs that can bring the nacelles, the pitching hubs, and the blades above the water surface. And in this drone shot here, you can see the entire floating platform in which all the power conversion and ancillary equipment is installed, and the nacelles now themselves, and the pitching hubs, and the blades all above the surface. And that really solves one of the conundrums that's been facing tidal stream energy. It's not just how to deliver tidal energy generation, because we can take a lot of analogous technology from the wind sector, but it's how to maintain these systems over a long-term 20-year project lifetime. So you'll see, obviously, it's quite controversial in some ways, the hydrogen economy. We all want to stimulate it in various ways we can, and there's a lot of talk about blue hydrogen and green hydrogen and grey hydrogen. And I just wanted to be kind of pretty transparent about the carbon footprint associated with our tidal technology, which is very, very, very competitive and very compelling versus even far more mature electricity generating sectors. So about a year ago, Zero Waste Scotland sponsored a piece of work by Exodus and Jacobs engineering consultancies to carry out a whole lifetime carbon analysis of our tidal technology, and specifically the O2 project, which will be operated at EMEC for approximately 15 years. And it was calculated that the carbon footprint of our technology was about 18 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. And this is already, very much in line with a number of much more mature technologies, very much in line with the likes of wind, both offshore and onshore, and solar, and often actually at a lower carbon footprint per, for this project than a number of existing solar PV projects. And our aim is to reduce that by a further 25%, reduce our carbon footprint of the technology by a further 25% over the next 2 years, particularly through a focus on the anchoring system and how we can reduce the mass of that system. So each unit is already capable of offsetting the CO2 equivalent associated with about 2,200 tons of fossil fuel generation in the UK, and that's based on the kind of the average or typical UK electricity generation mix at the moment. So we're already at a really, really good starting point, and we can reduce that carbon footprint even further. And so you can see that already, tidal energy, just on its own, without even considering the predictable nature of the technology, is a very, very good source of green hydrogen for a low carbon economy. And finally, I just want to speak a little bit about, and Chris kind of alluded to a number of these challenges and issues, but also opportunities as well regarding the complementary nature of tidal stream energy and hydrogen production. The first thing to say, and it often gets kind of bandied about, but it's very, very important and pertinent for hydrogen production. The tidal energy is a very different form of renewable energy to other more intermittent sources. It is a highly, highly predictable source of energy. Once we carry out an energy yield assessment for a site, we can, comfortably, years in advance, predict what the energy generation is going to be like on any given day. And this goes, hand in hand with the seasonality associated with it. So there's a lack of seasonality associated with with tidal energy generation. While there will be times, when we're producing more electricity than other times, generally, because of spring tides or neap tides, you can be pretty confident in the electricity you'll be producing at any time. We also, with our O2 tidal technology, we're generating at pretty high capacity factors in excess of 35%, maybe even up to 45% for future units, depending on the site. So when you're going to optimize and design a hydrogen plant, the characteristics of tidal stream energy and our tidal technology can allow for a very efficient form of design, and with that predictability really underpinning all of that as well. Another unique feature of tidal stream energy versus perhaps offshore wind and trends in offshore wind is projects tend to be situated no more than a few kilometers from shore. That's where you typically find commercial tidal generating currents and commercially viable locations. So again, it lends itself to advantages around, and optimization, I suppose, opportunities around where you situate the hydrogen plant, and reducing the balance of plant associated with electrical cabling and all the other ancillary equipment as well. So it's one of the another unique features and potential benefits associated with tidal stream energy. And on the other hand, as again Chris alluded to, there's a number of challenges facing the scaling of tidal stream energy that hydrogen can potentially assist with. Like other forms of renewables and offshore renewables, tidal energy can often be situated in peripheral coastal regions, not always, mind, but quite regularly. Low population regions, but don't typically have the large electrical infrastructure and grid capacity in place, already for historical reasons. So really, we need to find sometimes another way of getting the electricity from our arrays to consumers, and be that by developing a local hydrogen economy, And often, coastal regions do have large low demands. It's not always obvious because it might come from shipping or from on transport. But in Orkney, we're already seeing a fantastic amount of work being enabled by the ITEG project and others to develop that local demand base in terms of hydrogen ferries, even in aviation, and then also studies in the ITEG project looking at the consumer demand and the commercial demand as well in Orkney for hydrogen. But obviously further afield, as Josh presented upon, there is huge ambitions to transform our energy and kind of heating sectors towards hydrogen as well. So at a UK level and international level, there's going to be huge demand for hydrogen. So really, it does offer us another kind of a vector to get our energy away where there is challenges around the electricity infrastructure as well. So again, as Chris pointed out, we're really looking forward to over the next kind of couple of years working with the ITEG project to demonstrate how our tidal turbine, which is already installed at EMEC, can interface with the hydrogen electrolyzer and the battery storage, and really to respond to scenarios around kind of pricing signals to understand when it's best to produce hydrogen, to store energy or export to the grid. We also have additional plans to store or to install a further tidal turbine over the next kind of 3 years to have a small floating tidal array, and even to look at additional battery capacity as well. And really to demonstrate the complementary nature of tidal stream energy and its generating profile, and really look at how we can combine that with hydrogen production, with battery storage, to demonstrate a blueprint for an energy system and an energy solution of the future. So yeah, thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
That's great, James. Really interesting presentation, and it looks really cool as well, it has to be said. So yeah, quite a lot of questions actually. What are the main regions where there's strong potential for deployment of this technology?
Yeah, thanks, Diana. Well, I mean, obviously, we have, there's been a lot of focus on Orkney dependent Firth over the last number of years, because I mean, it probably represents 2/3 to 3/4 of the tidal stream capacity in the UK. But there is there's very significant resource also in Wales, around the Isle of Wight as well. The UK probably possesses about 50% of Europe's tidal capacity, but there's also really good capacity, particularly in France, but also into the Netherlands, Norway as well. So really, it's kind of the northwest of Europe. But then further afield, there's really exciting potential, gigawatts of potential right around the world, from North America, both in Canada, the USA, right over to the to the Far East, South Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Japan as well. And obviously, I'm starting to name a number of island nations, and obviously there might be unique kind of business cases as the costs of tidal energy reduce, as the costs of hydrogen plant reduce, of as I say, getting that electricity where it needs to, where there isn't necessarily a good electricity or well-developed electricity infrastructure in place. So we're very interested in working through the ITEG project and follow-on projects, and understanding the business case for and how it can help enable both tidal energy and hydrogen production in areas where there is large tidal resource, which I say is very global and very well distributed, where there isn't necessarily well developed electricity infrastructure.
Yeah. So thinking then, picking up on those points around cost, how are you planning to drive down the costs associated with tidal energy? What's the development pipeline looking like?
Yeah, so there's a few things we need. I mean, we've been doing a huge amount as a company, and I mean, the O2 turbine is a very significant upgrade on our previous prototypes, which is reducing our costs by at least 25, but probably more like 30 to 40% in a single unit iteration. So in a single unit iteration, we're driving the cost down of our technology and the sector by that amount. And that's true innovation. And that's really by, delivering at scale, these large 2 megawatt units, which we might see even creeping up into 3 megawatt units, and very high capacity factors. And that real focus on our solution of low cost installation and maintenance, and that overall configuration we have to enable that around a simplified on-site access with no heavy lift vessels. But there's no way of getting away from it. We need to scale the sector too. We need to just be able to reduce costs in the normal ways by working with our supply chain on reducing costs through building multiple units and the cost efficiencies that come with that. So we need to kind of see the signals from the UK government that they're going to put in place appropriate revenue support to support the scaling of the sector. We do need kind of a targeted revenue support to allow us to build out the first tidal arrays, which are going to have some cost inefficiencies associated with them, of course, versus large offshore wind projects and onshore wind projects, which have had, decades of a bit of a head start on us, so to speak. So we just need, a relatively limited amount of targeted revenue support and ring fence support to allow us to get those first projects off the ground. And we're hoping that there will be a kind of a step in that direction in the design of the auctions for coming out later this year under the Contracts for Difference framework in the UK.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question here about the environmental impact, and whether you talked about some reports that have been done, and where you'd looked at comparing tidal energy generation, the carbon footprint versus other renewable generation, other energy generation. But in terms of environmental impact assessment, what has been done around how that might affect the environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. So obviously our technology will go through in line with the EIA regulations and the marine licensing processes. There will be a full environmental impact assessment associated with any projects. More specifically, yes, there's more work to be done in terms of trying to quantify those impacts. We need to see more devices in the water, and we need to see more monitoring associated with those devices. So the things we've done already, the O2 has been in the water for the last kind of 3 months or so. We've already categorized the kind of the acoustic noise signature of the device, so that has implications for things like marine mammals. So just understanding that better. Other areas we'll look at are kind of things like collision risk, similar to wind farms. In the early days, they kind of quantified whether there's any collision risk impacts associated with the device with fish or diving birds and marine mammals. We'll be doing something similar through, with EMEC. We'll be looking at employing sonar, hydrophones and cameras on the device and other devices as they come on stream to understand that better. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's a device with pretty slowly rotating rotors, with a floating device. We've really got minimal seabed footprint, and we're even with the anchors we've got, we're looking to reduce the mass of those and the footprint of those even further. So with a floating platform with pretty slowly rotating rotors with very, very minimal seabed footprint, we've got all the fundamentals there to be a very, very benign form of low carbon generation. But there is further monitoring work required as more devices get deployed to understand those impacts a bit better.
Great, that's great. Thanks ever so much for that, James. I'll give you a call back in a bit. Moving on to our final speaker, we've got Richard Parkinson here. Since installing the first large-scale tidal energy device in 2008, Richard has pioneered standard practice for the sector, working with almost every past and current developer to deploy over 60% of Europe's total installed tidal energy capacity. Building on this wealth of experience, Richard and his team have patented and developed the HydroWing solution. And Richard is going to talk us through HydroWing right now.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Dan. Basically, I'm just going to talk about our HydroWing development, a little bit about our sort of thoughts on installation, O&M, cost reduction, and how we see it going forward. Unlike the Orbital device, ours is a subsea mounted device and it uses multiple turbines. So effectively, if I can, I've got a short animation which I think explains everything better. I'll just make sure the ghastly music is turned off that goes with it. So effectively, we use 6 of the Takado T2 turbines on our device. Depending on how we configure it, it is fairly flexible in terms of the configuration of the device. These turbines are 250 kilowatts each, and in the future we're looking to use the T3 turbines, which are up to 400 kilowatts each. So this gives us, ultimately we'll be looking at 1.5 to 3 megawatts of production, but at this stage, we're at the stage now where the turbines are very, very well proven, and the bits we're trying to prove is the control systems and taking those subsea and demonstrating how those can be used and developing a robust installation methodology. The key thing about our technology is that the wings are removable and using wet mate connectors, and our patents basically have a flow corridor for ensuring flow. We use the Takado bi-blade technology for bidirectionality with using fixed pitch. We don't need to use variable pitch. And then obviously lifting corridors so we can recover the turbines to the surface. We recover it. We have our own installation vessel, the Nyanga Ensho, which is currently undergoing conversion in order to recover these turbines and launch them. She's very, very efficient diesel electric vessel. She only consumes 2 to 3 cubes of fuel a day on DP and on transit, which is less than many of the workboats that go, and her daily OPEX is on a par with most workboats that we're using. She's a converted oil and gas vessel. She has very, very high maneuverability. Essentially, the installation process takes less than 20 minutes. There's no personnel required on deck during the installation, and it's completely controlled from the bridge. Our scale-up ambitions is, as I mentioned, is to use the T3 turbines in the next generation of devices, and to prove it, our first goal is to demonstrate the project, hopefully at EMEC next year, where we're looking to do a demonstrator using 3 of the early stage existing T1 turbines. Essentially, we have 2 products. I can go back. We have a double wing device, which is ideally suited to deep water locations, typically more than 30 meters deep, and the hub heights are at 22 meters and at around 14 meters. Because the advantage of this particular device is that we can elevate the device quite high into the water column. So we're at that sort of optimal height to get a very, very high yield. Close to the seabed, the yield isn't so good. We can get just above that sort of barrier zone. And also we get below the sort of disturbed turbulent water near the surface. We can also deploy on a single wing on a single device for sort of shallower channels, typically sub 20 meters depth, in order to that we can still generate good capacity on a single structure. It's more efficient if we can double it up, but not all locations, and some of the really good high yield locations are much shallower. So, we're flexible in terms of how it can be structured, how many turbines we put on. Essentially, the device has the turbine control hub, which is this blue section on there, which contains all the power electronics and all accessible bits. And this can be accessed for maintenance on the deck of the vessel. And all of the components can be changed in less than 6 hours, which is basically 1 slack tide, in order that the device can be installed. The inspiration for this device came from my experience of having worked on many devices where we're using very, very expensive assets for recovery. And many of these very large turbines end up spending months on shore being maintained. And our philosophy is to avoid all of that. Also, using multi-rotor devices has a huge advantage in that if one turbine does go down for any reason, we can continue operation with the other 5 turbines, and it's completely independent until we can get a vessel there to recover the device to the surface. Our experience is that very rarely is the issue in the turbines. We've operated the Takado OTP project, and it runs day in, day out with very little need for any form of intervention. So we're very, very confident to take these turbines subsea. The key areas we've got to demonstrate is the control hub and the wet mate connectors. We've also, in the last 3 months, acquired our own installation vessel in Yanga Ensha, which is just currently undergoing conversion. You can see the vessel on the right. As I mentioned, she's a very, very efficient diesel-electric vessel, and we're converting the vessel with a subsea crane, a 75-ton A-frame, and a mezzanine deck for ROV support. We don't need the ROV for launch and recovery in the HydroWing. It's all controlled from monitors, which are located on the bridge. So the overall cost and the operation cost and for recovering the devices is extremely low. Furthermore, we can undertake the whole installation process in 2 days, which gives the vessel potential to install well over 100 megawatts of capacity a day. So this is a machine that really will allow us to scale up in the future. We also use the vessel for supporting other projects. We're working with other tidal developers and that, and we're supporting them with that and working on several offshore wind projects at the moment, and a very, very busy schedule for the vessel planned ahead. There's an overview of the specifications. I think the key things of the modifications we're making is the A-frame ROV that we're putting on board and modifying the vessel for a range of operations, all in the renewable offshore sector. As I mentioned, in terms of our operation and maintenance strategy, our key focus is on having very, very reliable turbines, and Takado have probably the most proven and reliable turbines with over 46 running years to date. We currently operate 5 turbines on the OTP project, and they've been running seamlessly without any major problems and without any need for human intervention. The on-duty engineer can control everything from his phone these days, and I think it's probably 3-4 months since anyone even went down to the site. So it's that they're very efficient at remote operation. We also can achieve with this system a very, very high packing density. The spacing between the turbines is less than 50 meters, and the wake recovery is very good, again 50 meters down tide. So we can get up to around about 275 megawatts of installed capacity per kilometer squared, which is very, very important because good tidal sites are limited, and you want to get as much energy extraction from a given site as you can. In order, good tidal sites are going to become very, very valuable real estate going forward. The other key aspect is we carry a spare turbine. We have one in our facility in Veringenwerf in Holland, and that turbine can be mobilized and changed out on a device in less than 24 hours. HydroWing is scalability. At the moment, we're focusing on going from our T1s to T2s, which are our most proven turbine, and then up to the T3 turbines. We're following a very similar path to offshore wind, where it was the people that started small and gradually evolved that succeeded, as you can see by the pink lines in the top left graph. And we believe tidal will follow a very, very similar curve, and it's a lot cheaper to make the mistakes at small scale and to learn as we expand. I think the HydroWing has demonstrated in several jobs that we've tendered and put into, and it's demonstrated that one, it has very, very low capex, very efficient marine operations, and we eliminate all offshore lifts, heavy lifts, and the devices themselves can be packed in a 20-foot container and shipped anywhere in the world. Even our T3 turbines weigh no less than 20 tons. Offshore maintenance is enabled drastically, so we can reduce downtimes. Manufacturing of small turbines is going to be considerably cheaper. The lot less bespoke, the standard parts, and every time we double production, we can reduce our production cost by 15%. I mentioned already reliability, and also the other thing to mention is fatigue in our structure. Because we're using multi-rotors, we spread the fatigue more evenly through the structure, thereby increasing the life of the structure, whereas most projects are designed for or struggle to achieve a 20-year design life, we see no reason why 30 or even more years can't be achieved. And then obviously the power density, utilizing small turbines means we can pack them closer together and extract more energy per given area. As I mentioned, all parts are standard transportable, and we use wet mate connectors, which have had a very, very strong track record and very good high success in connecting and disconnecting the turbines. When was it? 2 years ago, we acquired Tidal, along with our partners QED Naval. We both were already collaborating and working together, and felt there was a need for a reliable turbine, and our timing was quite apt in that Tidal ran into difficulties and allowed us to put in a bid to take over the project. And since then, we've taken over the OTP project, which you can see on the bottom right, which we've been running successfully since February, and this has been gaining steady production throughout. Tidal have a very strong track record and a very simple, very robust engineering philosophy, which I was always a very huge fan of. I think anything going subsea needs to be robust, needs to be reliable, and needs to be simple. Coming over to the subject of hydrogen, it's something that's a subject that's always been very, very dear to my heart. And I've always felt there's a strong need for hydrogen, and I see it as being very essential in particularly marine transportation, particularly around ferries, inter-island, and supporting maritime communities. I've always been very, very impressed with the work that EMEC has done to date. Having looked at a lot of the sites we could see which would be suitable for either electricity production or hydrogen production, many of these sites are very, very far from population densities or from energy demand. So our philosophy was to come up with a remote system that could be operated, that didn't require any particular balance of plant other than the moorings, and that could be would produce the hydrogen on board and allow it to be transported remotely via existing vessels in the region. Hence, we developed the THIPSO project. We got quite far with the development and built up a very, very impressive consortium to develop the project. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in grant funding at the time, so we're reconsidering doing a smaller scale demonstration project, but I think our key focus is on developing turbines and developing our installation and O&M capability in the meantime. The key advantages of this system, I mean, to make hydrogen, you need two things: electricity. Ideally, it should be cheap electricity, and it definitely needs to be green electricity if it's going to be green hydrogen. You need water as well, and seawater is free water. Having said that, most systems now require the water to be desalinated, and this was programmed to be in the vessel. The system can be autonomous from the grid, so we can deliver the hydrogen directly to a suitable vessel, which may be consuming the hydrogen itself, and can distribute it to the grid, so eliminating distribution issues of the hydrogen, particularly if you're in an island community where the island you're producing it on may not be the island where you want it to deliver to or where the customer is. So that solves that problem. It's a single self-contained asset, which means it's easier to finance, and the consenting system is streamlined. There's only mooring lines on the seabed, no requirement for dynamic cables and issues which are very, very unreliable and very expensive when they go wrong. And we have very simple offshore operations, and these can really help decarbonize remote maritime communities and add wider skills to these regions. So that hopefully gives you an overview. I think in conclusion, I think our sort of philosophy and strategy going forward is that we've decoupled our technology from the volatile vessel markets, which is a huge bonus for us because those markets are getting even more volatile in the current situation, and we think pinning our future on that would be very disastrous. Installation and O&M cost strategy we can really develop at scale. 100 megawatts plus per year installation, very, very easy to turn it up and to go very rapidly into large scale production. Eliminating ROVs, everything is remote. We operate with no hands on deck during operation, and we operate with a very small crew rather than having 50 odd people on board when we're doing the operations. We have a robust installation O&M strategy, which is low cost, and we can reduce CapEx massively as well to make it as efficient as possible. Our strategy going forward to develop projects is to cluster smaller projects together and treat them as one project. We think this is a good approach in order to get that scale that we need, through smaller demonstration projects and using our assets and capabilities in order to develop those projects more rapidly. We believe that tidal energy LCOE costs can be comparable with offshore wind at a scale of 100 megawatt plus. We feel that we don't see any reason why we can't compete with offshore wind. There's no physical constraint. Our capacity factors are similar. It's just a matter of driving the cost down, particularly in terms of the turbine production we see as the main area. In terms of installation, we're already at half the installation cost per megawatt installed of offshore wind using the system I've described to you. Hopefully that gives you an overview of the potential of tidal energy, not just for electricity production, but also for hydrogen production going forward. You'll find my contacts and also my colleague Diane, who runs our French office, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. Really interesting presentation of the full value chain there, all the way from tidal energy production right the way through to innovative hydrogen production, I think. If we can get there. A couple of questions for you. Can you highlight the benefits of a multi-turbine system as opposed to a single turbine system?
Yes, certainly. I think the key thing is manufacturing cost. I think we can massively reduce the manufacturing cost. I mean, in order to manufacture at scale, we would envisage a large OEM partner. We're already engaged with a couple of OEMs, and it would be relatively straightforward for them to set up the facilities and to produce the turbines at a very, very low cost. We know already that our turbines are fairly competitive, and it wouldn't take much to get that cost down even further. By mass producing smaller units, we get down the cost curve much quicker. There's a lot less bespoke systems in it. And then I think the other advantages are logistics. We can ship them around just using a forklift, and we can transport them in standard containers and move them to remote locations. If we're doing a project on the other side of the world, it's not a problem. It's relatively easy to ship the containers, and a lot of the steel work and stuff can be done more locally. So I think those are the key advantages.
And where is HydroWing in terms of TRL?
At the moment, our turbines that we're using are already at TRL 8 as they're already being used. The HydroWing device will be installed next year, and our plan is to take it from TRL level 4 up to TRL level 8 within the next year.
Excellent. You talked a bit about cost and being comparable with offshore wind. Mm-hmm. So what levelized cost of energy is achievable today, and where do you see it going, and what scale does it need to be at in order to reach that kind of level?
I think to get our target cost close to around about £100 per megawatt hour, I don't think we need to compete with offshore wind in terms of the actual cost of energy, because we're predictable, which makes our commodity prices more attractive in terms of wholesale prices. And so I think we need to be targeting somewhere in the region of £100 so that we're close or competing with nuclear, and we're nipping at the heels of offshore wind is where we need to be.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring the other guys back in, and I'm going to pick up on some of the questions that we haven't yet addressed. Just to say to the audience, if we don't get through all of the questions on the Q&A, then we will follow up afterwards as part of the delivering the recording and the slides, etc. Okay, so I'm going to start with kind of a general comment, really general question. What contribution do you think tidal energy could make to the UK's 5 kilowatt target? So Josh outlined the target 5 gigawatt target in
we're almost there, aren't we?
in 2030. Given where we are in terms of development of the technology, and given that perhaps the regulatory framework that we're in at the moment, what contribution do you see? And maybe I'll start with James.
Yeah, so as you said, it is really challenging until we do have that revenue support framework in place. I mean, we've recently started a project called Forward 2030. It's a Horizon 2020. Horizon 2020. Horizon? Yes, 2020 project called 20. Yes, but anyway, the name of the project is Forward 2030, and really that's an ambition to have around kind of 2 gigawatts of tidal stream projects, either well on the way to kind of being developed, being commissioned around 2030, so around 2 gigawatts. Now, in any of our analysis, there's a high degree of uncertainty there, because we can go faster or we can go slower depending on what the revenue support is available. And I don't like to make it feel like we're looking for a subsidy or anything like that, but it's really just that every other renewable energy generating sector historically has had very large amounts of revenue support, be in the form of either the renewable obligations or feed-in tariffs or other forms, just to help them get their costs down. And what we're looking for is a very modest amount of ring-fenced install capacity. So we're looking for just even to have sight to ring-fenced revenue support for the next 100 megawatts. So I'm not talking about gigawatts, but even just to have sight of some sort of ring-fenced revenue support for the next 100 megawatts would provide a huge amount of confidence, for ourselves, for our private investors, for the supply chain, in really, giving the sector the interest, and that it requires really to look at how we can reduce costs through scaling. So as I say, there's huge potential there. I mean, theoretically, there are there's gigawatts of potential in the UK, in the UK waters. There's probably of the order of 10 gigawatts or more. As Richard said, a lot of it's going to depend on how many turbines we can pack into a given area. So there's still a further work required to understand that a bit better. What is the realistic capacity? But there is certainly gigawatts of potential, and we want to be well on the way to harnessing that by 2030. But we do need kind of further sight of what the revenue support is going to look like, and that's what we're kind of working with the UK Marine Energy Council and hopefully government on understanding better.
So looking for a level playing field versus other renewables, really.
Yeah, or even looking for a lot less than what was offered historically to other renewables. We're not looking for that same level of support that was necessarily offered to wind and solar or offshore wind. We're just looking for a modest amount of ring fence support, something of the order of 100 megawatts, that allows us to get the first 10 megawatt project in the water, the first 15, 20 megawatt project in the water. And we can even through doing that, we can very significantly reduce costs. We'll continue to, as much as we can, invest in reducing costs through innovation. We have another project lined up called the Horizon 2020 project. It is going to take the costs of our unit and reduce them by a further 25% in a single unit iteration. So we're being incredibly ambitious and going beyond any kind of learning rates, really, any theoretical learning rates, reducing the cost of our technology. But we can't do that through innovation alone. We do need to kind of be able to scale the sector as well.
So Richard, sort of building on that point, I'm just wondering, is the tie to hydrogen and the link to that hydrogen, does that give the tidal energy sector an added focus in order to look for the appropriate levels of support to get down that development curve? I'm
a bit cautious about throwing all our eggs in the basket of hydrogen, because I think we need to get down the cost curve rapidly, and I think I think ultimately I see hydrogen as being very, very important. I don't think it's an immediate priority for tidal energy. I think getting low cost production, and hydrogen just needs low cost electricity basically. And if we're not producing low cost electricity, it's not going to be of any use. So I see I see that getting to scale is the most important thing, and getting to scale quickly by developing industrialized processes to get there as the key thing in order to achieve. I mean, 5 gigawatts by 2030 is achievable, but it needs political will. It could be massive industry. I mean, effectively, you look at the Pentland Firth. I mean, you could build the equivalent of 3 to 4 nuclear power stations there in the Pentland Firth if there was the political will to do it, and it could be done in a lot quicker timescale than building nuclear power stations could be done, and with a lot less effect. I mean, effectively, there's nothing visible on the surface. The channels are still navigable, and we think that we can achieve that relatively easily. It's getting those productions. If the political will was there, it would happen, and I've absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, building on that point, I get your point that there's lots of work to be done in terms of bringing the cost of tidal energy down, full stop.
Yeah.
But the link, I mean, I see the link to hydrogen. I mean, there is no doubt that hydrogen is very much a hot topic politically and environmentally now. So I see some benefit potentially for the tidal industry to sort of ride on that wave, and utilize that, as well as contributing to the hydrogen. Development of the hydrogen economy as well. So maybe just coming to Josh and Chris, there's a question on an interesting question on the chat. Energy analysts such as Michael Liebrich has proposed merit orders for hydrogen use, with some of the applications mentioned on the webinar, for example, home heating, light vehicles and ferries, towards the lower priority end, with the electrification proposed as being more appropriate for these. How does such a ranking or merit order change for island or remote communities? So I guess they're asking in the scheme of what can be electrified and what can be converted to hydrogen, should some applications take priority in terms of support than others? So I don't know, Josh, maybe.
I'll come on first. I'd love to give one blanket answer that fits all scenarios, but I think it's sort of an island by island basis, because you look at these applications and how they suit to geographies, and you look at the sort of islands like Tenerife, and they're very mountainous and hilly, and then they'd need perhaps battery vehicles wouldn't suit their needs, so you'd have to look at hydrogen vehicles there, but in a more flat geography, then perhaps battery vehicles could take the lion's share. And you also look at maybe towards Mallorca, and they've already got natural gas infrastructure on their island, so you can look to employ hydrogen gas grid blending there, but you can't do that at somewhere such as Madeira, which doesn't have that. But also there's this issue of sort of the energy dependency of islands, and all these issues, all these applications sort of spike up in their need to be replaced by zero emission alternatives, because these islands will keep on importing fossil fuel solutions as long as they have to, whereas if they had a zero emission alternative, and they wouldn't get impeded by carbon taxes, etc., and then leading them to having to spend more and more money on their fueling, which is a very large proportion of islands' economic output. So I think that's it'd be great to say that islands shift the priorities of these by 3 marks or whatever, but I think it is a very case by case basis, and I don't know if you'd agree with that, Chris.
Very much so, Josh. I think, like I say, the Orkney Islands are very unique in what tidal resources they have and other natural resources, and that's different for each country, which you described there from a geographical basis. I think Orkney is quite unique with it being at the end of the UK national grid system. We've produced, I think, about 120% of energy through renewables, but we can't export it. We can't do anything with it, and it's really a shame that is the situation at the moment. Hence why hydrogen is just one solution where we can start to decarbonise local transport, for example, and the inter-island ferries, which we have discussed. They're like the local bus fleet of an urban area, and they unfortunately are running on diesel engines at the moment. So one way and one solution is to convert them, and then to ensure that the Orkney Islands are starting to reduce their carbon footprint and working towards net zero, which is a fantastic achievement. But yeah, that definitely doesn't apply to large urban areas as well. So I think you're right, Josh, definitely a case by case basis.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. We're actually out of time. What I'd say to the audience is any questions that are still unanswered, we'll endeavour to answer them over the course of the next few days, and we'll provide a Q&A response sheet alongside the material from the webinar. So just to say, last of all, thank you very much for your attendance to the audience. Thank you very much to all of the speakers for participating in a really interesting discussion in a fantastic area for renewables that perhaps hasn't had the focus that it deserves. I would lastly say, please look out for our next webinar, which is scheduled for February, and more details on that will follow. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.